We now bring to you a special address on achieving net zero infrastructure. A very warm welcome to architect Dikshu Kukreja, architect, urban designer, planner, environment and infrastructure expert, TEDx speaker, managing principal at CP Kukreja Architects. We welcome you, sir.
So we are all gathered here today to be discussing something which is really affecting the lives of each one of us and our near and dear ones. It's time we really need to understand that it is vital that net zero as a philosophy, as a culture, as a way of life is mainstreamed. And we need to find ways, innovative ways of how net zero can be implemented and can become an integral part and parcel of our lives. So I would like to today discuss the possibilities, the opportunities that are there with net zero and embracing net zero through the medium of architecture. As we all are aware that the real estate and construction industry has a very significant role to play as far as pollution or carbon emissions, etc. are concerned. But it does not mean that this has to stop as far as real estate and construction is concerned. We need to only find new innovative ways of how we are going to be doing and embracing this change of net zero. Let's look at what is net zero. What are we talking about when we look at net zero? I'll give you an interesting example. Many of us have visited Fatehpur Sikri, and world over has been recognized as one of the more influential piece of urban design. It's considered a city which came about from nowhere and became a marvel as far as architectural design is concerned. Fatehpur Sikri embraced principles of a homogeneous use of local material. It had passive cooling, a lot of elements like jali, colonnades, courtyards, etc. And yet, after a few years, this whole city was abandoned. The reason for that is that this intervention into our built environment was at the cost of nature. It was not built considering even the fundamentals of where the water systems for this city will come from, where the water will come from. And as a result, the whole city was abandoned. I think this moment in history teaches us a lot, that we can create architectural marvels, but by doing that, are we really achieving something which is sustainable, something that is going to live through times? And that is what net zero is about. Why do we need net zero? That's another question many people ask. How is it affecting our generation? Why do we have to make the sacrifices today for who knows what happens tomorrow? Well, we need to do it today because it's really now become the need of the hour. This is the kind of life we all are living in cities. Anywhere we go, these are the kinds of crowds or overcrowded that we see and experience everywhere. This is the kind of air we are breathing day in, day out. And that affects every single individual, every single inhabitant who lives in the city. And this is becoming our norm, where we are walking around with our mouths closed, with our faces covered. That's not called healthy living. And when we go out on the street, this is the kind of public spaces that we are ending up creating. More and more and more roads being built, only to accommodate more and more and more of transport, vehicular transport, and all at the cost of a very net zero environment-friendly solution like pedestrian and non-motorized vehicle movements. We are putting them aside at the cost of creating more and more roads for vehicular movements. And as a result, this is what our rivers are beginning to look like. These are not three angels standing amidst clouds, but they are actually standing in the river Yamuna, which is right here in Delhi. And that's the kind of complexion we have given to the rivers which run through our cities. And as a result, climate change is creating havoc, and this is how our forests are alighting, burning away. We are cutting down trees, or they are themselves being felled because of climatic issues like forest fires. So really, what we need to look at is what the government of India and our Prime Minister has outlined as a very forward-thinking and future-embracing concept of Panchamrit, which was discussed and announced at the COP26 conference, which happened recently. And when we look at these 5 principles that we are talking about reaching non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatt in the next 8 years. We are talking about fulfilling 50% of our energy requirements via renewable energy within the next 8 years. We are also talking about reducing 1 billion carbon emissions by 2030 and the carbon intensity by more than 45% by 2030. And then, of course, is the target of achieving complete net zero for the entire country. And remember, we are talking about 1/6 of the population that lives on this planet by 2070. Now, these are very forward-thinking and ambitious targets, but certainly I would say each of them are very, very achievable. So then, who is really leading net zero? Do we expect the Prime Minister and other political leadership, which was gathered around at COP26, to be leading it? Or does it need a different kind of mindset? I believe that this is only achievable if this becomes the mindset and is actually led by each one of us. Every individual needs to realize the significance and criticality of net zero. And with that, we ourselves need to become leaders of how we are doing that. The leadership could be happening around in our neighborhoods, in our schools, colleges, in our workplaces. Every institution that we can think of or we are part of, we need to become the leaders of change as far as embracing net zero is concerned. And there are many, many ways to do that. But at this moment, I would only say that we need to understand that the who leads net zero is really for us to introspect and see that we ourselves need to be the influence of this change. And how is this net zero really going to be possible? And what are the ways to embrace it? Well, being an architect and planner, I'm going to just share a few examples with you of how we are looking at it in the architectural domain of creating this kind of environment-friendly, environment-embracing built environment. So I'm going to show you an example of a university setting. This university, which has been designed by our firm, CP Kukreja Architects, has incidentally been selected amongst the 10 best designed universities in the whole world. And that is a moment of pride because it's the government of India, the government of UP to be precise, which has been the influencer or the promoter of this university. And they have allowed such a campus to come up, which is embracing the principles of net zero. So this is a bird's eye view of what the campus looks like, surrounded by a large water body. The concept, of course, of this university was because it's called Gautam Buddha. So the idea is that the first thing that comes to one's mind about Buddha is his simple means of living, his meditative posture, and from an iconic point of view, we took the inspiration of the meditative posture, and where the head of Buddha is where the library is located at the top end of the screen, where the body of Buddha is where the academic schools are, and at the feet lies the administration building on the bottom right image. And that's how the inspiration came up. But that was not just about iconic value of this campus. It was also about the principles of Buddhism, the principles of simple living and high thinking, and how an institution can really promote that. So this is the overall 511 acres of the campus. And when we visited the site for the first time, we saw that on such a large piece of land, right here at the neighborhood of Delhi, you find that there's not a single tree growing on this 511 acres. So the very first thing we did was this heavy plantation that you see towards the left of the screen, that we felt here is an opportunity to create a forest. And we all know what benefits an urban forest can do. That urban forest of 50 acres creates a completely different microclimate of this entire area, which is also aided by the fact that there is heavy plantation at all along the periphery of the campus. And then the vehicles on this campus were kept to be discouraged in a way and only restricted to the periphery of the campus. The rest of it was a very pedestrian-friendly campus that has been created. And that's an image of how Lord Buddha's image was seen in the architectural design or plan of the campus. But the idea has been of bringing in green and blue, a lot of greenery, and as I said, forestation, and a complete system of water bodies. So this lake that you see, which is over a 5 acres of lake that has been created on that campus, becomes a source of water collection. So whatever water comes in the high periods, such as monsoon, gets collected here, and that water then becomes a source for being used as a supply mechanism for the running of the university. So rather than allowing the water to drain out, choke the roads outside, choke the drains outside, the water becomes an element which is an integral part of the campus. And this is how the landscaping plays a very, very significant aspect. And there are artificial landscapes that have been created, such as mounds, and doing sculpting the land, profile of the land, so that it allows the water system also to be integrated into the entire planning of the university. Here you see how the buildings have also been configured. Rather than just having one mega building as an academic building, they have been broken down into smaller buildings which allow for natural ventilation, cross ventilation, small courtyards to be created. And that all these systems are part and parcel of our historical architecture. They only need to be reinterpreted and brought to the fore today. That's what I believe embracing net zero architecture is about. Historically, our civilizations have learned to live with the environment. It's only today modern society has forgotten to do that in our sort of very audacious and arrogant approach. Here you see another image of how those academic buildings have very pedestrian-friendly walking spaces, and they are all protected by this element of jali, which is a very strong element of Indian architecture, which helps in passive cooling. There's a complete system of water bodies which runs through the whole campus, and here you see how water preservation and that water conservation takes place in the entire campus. So these are principles that I feel are very, very important, and here I believe that when one creates or designs such a university, I hope that the students who are living in this university campus are already, for them, natural environment, nature has become part and parcel of their living. Even if they are living in the city, we have taught them by having them live in that kind of a campus of Gautam Buddha University, how to embrace nature. Here is another example of a very different kind of development. Many people would say, how, not everyone has the luxury of 500 acres of land. And in the city, you have to have high density development. So how do you embrace nature? How do you embrace net zero architecture when you have to build high rise? You have to accommodate a lot of people on a small piece of land. So here is something where we have designed for Delhi. In fact, for the Delhi Development Authority, DDA, this is India's first transit-oriented development project. And what does that mean? That means that we are saying, let's shun the private vehicles. Let's not give the private cars so much importance. Yes, you can own them certainly, but there is a viable alternative. And that alternative is that you have what you see on the left of your screen, you have public transit. So on this site of 80 plus acres in East Delhi, you have 2 metro corridors which are running through this site. And what we have created is a mixed-use development, which of course has this tallest building of Delhi being constructed right now, and very high-density housing. But at the same time, a lot of greenery and all principles of net zero architecture, including this image that you see. We are creating a large green public park, which is not only going to serve the inhabitants of this 80 acres, but it becomes a green oasis for the rest of East Delhi as well. So just a visual to show you how this kind of a design has emerged. I'm just showing you a small video. This is how this planning is different from the regular planning that we see in cities, where we demarcate a certain area of the city for commercial development, another part of the city far away for residential development, and then people have to travel these distances, causing pollution all the time, moving from one end to the other. Here we have created what is a mixed use development, and the planning principles are organic. The idea is that these simple courtyard plans that you see, this is where you have retail and commercial happening at the lower levels, which activate the streets, and above them become the development of residential. So this is a very different principle of organic architecture, of creating an organic density, and that's how it is looking at. So while it has a very high density and it has high rises, but that does not mean that it takes away the quality of these pedestrians who are walking there. It takes away the quality of the publicness from the city. It in fact enhances that. And these principles that you see even in the architectural design and planning of creating stilted areas where the breeze blows through, and when a breeze blows through this kind of a water body, it immediately has a cooling effect. And these principles change the microclimate of the area. Automatically, you require less artificial energy to cool the buildings when you have created an effect in the microclimate of that space itself. Moving on, I'm going to share one last example with you of how India is today poised at a point where we are being able to exemplify to the world what net zero architecture is about. For the last 100 years or for the last 75 years since independence, for a long time, we have been looking towards the West to give us solutions of how we need to build. Today, we are poised to show the world how we should be building. And I'm proud to inform you that the India Pavilion, which we designed at the Expo 2020 in Dubai, which is currently on, is an example which for here in this case, the American Institute of Architects has selected it as one of the most iconic pavilions. And that is because it is embracing the theme of sustainability. So this is the entire view of what the Expo 2020 in Dubai looks like. And towards the right of your screen, you see is the location of the India Pavilion. And that is the theme of the Expo is three themes: opportunity, mobility, and sustainability. And we are here in this opportunity district where the India Pavilion is. And that's again what you see towards the front of the screen where the India Pavilion site has been located. And the idea here has been, again, for us to show the world that even while India has built one of the largest pavilions at the Expo, and our building is not just a pavilion which will be taken down once the Expo is over, it's a permanent building, which are only 3 such pavilions out of 190 at Dubai Expo, which will be permanent. You see the principles of shading. We have a plaza and how that plaza can be shaded, the elements of visual continuity, of also showing the world principles of Jantar Mantar and such historical monuments that we have had. But all this came as far as the design of the building based on a lot of studies of the environment, whether it was the wind analysis, whether it was the shading patterns through the day or through the year. All these were important elements that were looked at. And then we wanted to show to the world that while we are transforming and modernizing as a nation, we do not want to forget our past. We do not want to ignore our history. So for example, here, we took the inspiration of the important stones, the natural stones of India. And from that, we derived a system of facade. And this facade is a kinetic facade. It's one of the first times India has attempted that this facade moves. It's not a static facade. So that becomes the facade of the Expo. And why is it so? It is so because we want to demonstrate the principles of net zero architecture or sustainability. Because this building is a permanent building beyond the Expo, and also The use of the building inside, it's 5 floors, but one is not sure yet what this building will be used for eventually once the expo is over. So we have created a facade which not only moves, but it also gives the flexibility of how much glazing or how much opening you want, how much sunlight you want to come into that space, whether the inside space will be tomorrow a library or a museum or an office. Depending on its use, you will be able to control the amount of sunlight needed for the usability of that space. It also allows, based on the sun movement and the climate during the year, for the amount of sunlight to enter into the building. We are able to control that. So this is how the facade really works in the India Pavilion. And of course, allowing tremendous opportunity to express the different facets of India at the ongoing expo by changing its patterns, by changing its colors, by having digital projection like this. It becomes a backdrop. The building itself becomes a backdrop of showing the milieu of Indian architecture, Indian culture, India as it stands and its potential. So I feel that as architects, we have a very, very significant role to play. And we are not going to here leave it at professionals, whether it is architects or whether it's environmentalists. As I said earlier, if we want to influence change, if we want to really embrace a net zero way of life, it has to be by each and every one of us. For example, as I mentioned earlier, I've often heard that the real estate and construction industry in India, not just in India, world over, it contributes almost 40% of the carbon emission. Now, what's the solution here? If we look at the real estate, I believe that if we as users start seeking solutions from developers where we want buildings which should be only environment friendly, the developers themselves will be forced to create that kind of an architecture. Unless we expect that as a consumer, whether it is from a real estate developer for our building or for our home or office, or it is the kind of public transport we choose, or any other medium, whether we go to a restaurant and we see, or we go for retail and we see the kind of products, how they are being created, are they environment friendly? All that has to become part of our culture. One last thing I would like to appeal also is that in India, we often believe that it's the capex, the capital expenditure, which is more important. And therefore, we like to cut costs because we feel we don't want to spend more to incorporate elements of green building or sustainability. I think we are now past that time. I think we need to demonstrate that we are concerned about our environment, we have to safeguard our environment, and we have to embrace net zero. And for that, even if we have to incrementally add a little more into the capex of buildings which are going to live a lifetime beyond our own lifetime, we need to spend that kind of expenditure on our buildings to make sure that they are absolutely environment friendly. With this, I believe the time is right. The call that has been made by the Prime Minister about Panchamrit and embracing net zero is something that India is poised to achieve. And I'm confident that in the real estate, construction and design fields, we have the technology and the aptitude to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Architect Kukreja, for joining us and really for showcasing us all that you and your team have been doing, those projects and so much more, how you are working towards making tomorrow so much more better for our generations to come. And all set to now present to you a very interesting fireside chat on accelerating the journey to decarbonizing. And I'll be soon introducing our speakers right here, so please do stay tuned.